Vedic astrology through the Vedantic thought shift our fundamental understanding of a birth chart, moving away from the question of what will happen to me, like that's what people ask most often, to who am I evolving into?
The entire fundamental basis of the Vedas is self-inquiry. Okay, it's about understanding your own self better and eventually realizing that you are one with the divine. That's like the basis of all of the Vedas. It's what they call as the one undivided consciousness, which is Brahman. And we're all essentially manifestations of the same divine consciousness. And anything that has ever come out of the Vedas is just something that either is in support of that or will help aid in that journey. So Vedic astrology or Jyotish means the science of light. What that means is basically Jyoti is, as you know, light, is also to be able to aid you on that path of self-discovery, of getting you closer to your own self. Now, what has happened over the last few hundred years is that astrology became extremely predictive. And I'm not saying that it's not predictive. It gives you a great sense of understanding of, what kind of, karmic blueprint are you born with? What kind of tendencies are you born with? What kind of, these tendencies are essentially called samskaras. Are you here with? What is the work that you're meant to do in terms of the evolution of your own soul? And somewhere along the way, that entire process became very predictive, more from material lens. Okay, so obviously in the 12 houses in astrology, there's one house that represents a fair few things in one's life and fair few aspects of one's life. So is it possible to say, okay, a certain period is going to be more beneficial in terms of money, or is it going to be more beneficial in terms of a relationship, etc.? Yes, I mean, it's possible because it's like the understanding of the unfolding of one's journey. But is that all that it was about? And was it about also then trying to fix that narrative? It's like they're going to be at any given point in time in your life, there's going to be certain things that are going to be working for you, and there are going to be certain things that require more effort. Okay, so for example, like if one's career is doing really well, it's not necessary that everything else in their life is doing exceptionally well as well. So it's about being able to understand at every given point in time what is more prominent, what is a priority, what are the things you need to pay more attention to and put more energy into, and what are the things you need to kind of work better towards or work more towards. Now, what happened within the predictive space is that it became more of like trying to now fix what is not working for you. So if you say, okay, now I have money, but now I need a relationship. So because I need a relationship, you tell me, how do I get a relationship? And then it started becoming so much about trying to fix the external self, and it became completely the opposite of trying to understand yourself better. It had nothing to do with, okay, what are the things you need to learn with respect to relationships? What kind of evolution do you need to go through? Is there something that you need to let go of? Which is really the Vedantic view of life is, understanding that life is inherently transient. You have to let go. There's certain karmic relationships that you go through. What were the learnings that you have to go through because of those things? And I'm saying relationships because that's the example, but that kind of translates into everything in our life. And over the last, couple of 100, 300, 400 years, it's just become more of trying to, like I said, fix this through remedies that actually never existed. So I don't know if you're familiar with the stuff that people do in the name of remedies and we're trying to fix this. Actually, when the Hora Shastra was written, there was no mention, in fact, of any Shastra that was written on astrology, really. Because astrology is a limb of the Vedas. And that is also, again, to help illuminate your path. So there was no remedial way of like, okay, this is what has been dealt to you as a karmic situation. Now you can basically just do this and that is going to change. It doesn't work like that. If a certain situation in your life is meant to come as a lesson, then you can't really take that away from your life through like a certain ritual that is now been prescribed. So I think what happened over the years is a lot of fear came into play. A lot of, if you don't do this, then this will happen. Oh, but if you do this, your life is going to change, and so on and so forth. So I think if you're looking, if anyone is really looking at astrology from more of a lens of just understanding it from who you are, what your potential is, where does your fear come in? Because I think with every passing year or every passing decade, rather, like fear that we all live with is just significantly on the rise, right? There's more desire, more fear of losing something, more insecurities. With like the social media space, everything has just kind of gotten much worse. So I think with astrology, it really helps you understand your own self better when you're like kind of really stuck in that noise. And if you look at it from the Vedantic worldview, it helps you really tap into your own potential and then make sense of all of this more from like the lens of how do you become a better version of yourself. So if you really mix both of those and like take away this incessant sort of obsession with trying to understand what my next 1 month is going to look like, and how is this relationship going to turn out, and various different things that people want to know. I think that the real power of astrology is in the former and not necessarily in the latter.
So most of us look for instant answers and even control over our lives.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the karmic blueprint that we're born with. How is it that one can understand what their life path is, correlating it with the cosmic timings, which we call dashas, help us understand our lived reality without feeling helpless that it's all fated? Like, how does one deal through that?
Okay, so firstly, we have this kind of conception of everything is fated. Everything is not fated. What dashas are essentially is it's the ebb and flow of life. Everything is constantly moving. Everything around you is moving. And if you look at the universe, there is not one thing that stays where it is. Whether it is the galaxy in itself or the planets or the stars, even like the moons, everything is constantly moving, right? So dashas, it's about understanding that movement better. It's about not feeling like now you're stuck. It's about understanding that, for example, you're in a period that's ruled by, say, Rahu, considering that you were giving the example of digital media or social media in that space. Now, Rahu represents the entire social media space. It represents everything to do with the external world, material world, which we see more and more of now. And it creates this sense of like obsession, addiction, anxiety, stress. All of that is governed by Rahu. Now, when you're in, when there's a lot of influence of Rahu, if you're able to understand that influence and know that, okay, you're in a period that is ruled by Rahu, Rahu tends to bring you a lot more success and recognition in terms of work, in terms of anything which can materially kind of fulfill you, right? But it's not really an emotionally fulfilling period. So what it does, what is helpful is, okay, to understand maybe this is not a relationship period. This is not when you want to force yourself down a relationship. And it's like, because there could be that sense of feeling a void, but that void is not necessarily going to get filled through a relationship. This is where a lot of toxic relationships also tend to happen. Also, Rahu is extremely intelligent. So if you're able to then kind of utilize your mind space in like something which is more innovative, or learning about, say, something like AI, or reading more, or even just getting into more like meditative, anything which is more in the meditative space. Like meditation is something that genuinely really helps slow your mind down, helps you see things a little bit more clearly. So what a dasha is really meant to do is not supposed to make you feel caged. It's about making you understand and see that period a little bit more clearly, and not try to force yourself down a path that is not necessarily working for you, but you're like, no, I'm gonna make this happen like immediately. And I see this more in like a personal life space, right? It's like we're always looking for a relationship and work is going well, and then looking for like work to go better when a relationship is going well, and we're not okay with any aspect of our life really struggling. So it's like, figure out what is working out for you, and dashas will always show you, put your energy here and the rest will follow. If like you're in a period that's, say, there's a lot of Saturnian influence, Saturn tends to basically make you work harder. So instead of now going and trying to fix Saturn, work hard. I mean, it's like, understand that it's going to eventually teach you a thing or two, and I've done this with so many of my clients, and trust me, like Saturn can be incredibly innovative with the kind of delays that Saturn brings. But at the end of the day, it also teaches you so much about the kind of delays that one can end up facing, which you would feel like crazy. For everyone who thought that, life is like, oh my God, if you're putting in the work, like things are going to happen. Saturn will come and show you, you really thought that it's that easy. Like when the universe decides to create obstacles, it will create the kind of obstacles that you can, like, your brain cannot even imagine, And I've seen that. I've seen like the most, like the most ridiculous kind of challenges that people have run into in a period that's, perhaps ruled by Saturn or Saraswati or anything on the lines of that. So it's always trying to teach you a little bit more about perseverance, teach you a little bit more about, discipline, structure, and that's the whole point. It's, instead of fighting that period in that sense, it's about, in my opinion, and the way that I've always looked at it, learn the lesson so that it doesn't get more difficult for you. So it's not like, oh my God, I'm now stuck in, I'm imprisoned by these planets. Just flow with their energy, So if you're going to keep, like I said, knocking on the wrong door, you're going to feel, that suffering you're going to end up creating for your own self.
Concerns now are less about external milestones like marriage, wealth, career, but more towards people seeking answers on what should they prioritize during these major shifts or astrological, one could say, turning points in their life, and understanding their soul's purpose. So is that something which you also feel that's like a shifting trend, or no, people just focus on certain milestones and the obvious questions?
So, I mean, that's a great question, but I feel like I've also seen that trend shift more with my clients, more so because, I think anyone that knows my work knows that that's kind of what I do. I'm not the right person if you're looking to, for prescribed kind of remedies, and you want like, you want me to give you like something that's going to change your life, which is external. Because I've always talked about the importance of working on your own inner self. Even if you want to get the most of a planetary period, you'll have to eventually put in the work yourself. So I think over the years, the more people that I see, and it's not just for the younger generation, I think at least the people that I've had the privilege of working with look at more of like, okay, try to understand your purpose, trying to understand, how do we become just better human beings, perhaps, become a better version of themselves. And purpose has become like something that I hear a lot from like younger kids, and that I find very surprising, but also great, because, those are not conversations I was having when I was 18. So I see more awareness around it, but I also still feel like I see, a whole bunch of people still that are still going after the material and external sort of milestones. So I think there's a big mix of both. I've just fortunately been able to, speak more with people who are looking at things from a different lens.
Have access to all these resources online, even with AI, where people can feed in their birth charts and get an interpretation. But I want to ask you this: where does the algorithmic analysis end and the real Vedantic insight begin? What is the science behind that?
So there's a big market today, I want to say, when it comes to like this online astrological situation. You have a whole bunch of apps which are doing readings. You also have a whole bunch of people on the apps that will do the readings for you for like ₹1 a minute and things like that. And this is not just in India. I've seen a whole plethora of apps across the world that have come up in the astrology realm. But if you ever go to, say, 5 different astrologers and you get your birth chart read, they're going to have the same birth chart, because the mathematics of it is the same in terms of the calculation and what the birth chart looks like. But the interpretation of it is going to be completely different. If not completely different, I want to say fairly different. They will see the same dashas, they will see the same planets, they will see the same nakshatras, etc. But what they make of a birth chart will be very different. Because a lot of it is eventually going to come down to your own experiences as an astrologer, but also a lot of it, in my opinion, is intuitive. So I don't think most astrologers look at astrology from like a Vedantic lens, which is, I mean, for me, it was always like something that comes out of the Vedas has to be a big part of the Vedas, if you look at it from that kind of holistic view. So for me, everything is about getting you closer to your own self and improving your kind of mindset and your life through that. But I think most people don't do that. So for them, it's a very limited lens of just looking at astrology from that space. And it's the same thing with even AI, right? AI is, firstly, if you put a birth chart on like any AI tool, they're going to say, it's going to say a bunch of things, but like even its basic understanding of what a house is, and especially like a North Indian birth chart, it will not understand. So some people seem very happy, because I mean, if it's entertainment and you're trying to like get a nice evening out of it, no problem. But it's, I would say, very unsafe to get a reading done from like AI, because there is a big level of intuition that is at play with when it comes to astrology, for sure. Because like I said, it's the same mathematically, it's the same, but so much of it is interpretation, and I don't know if like how much AI's consciousness is going to give you the stuff that needs to be, I mean, that you need in order to actually make your life better.
Having said that, how is your personal understanding of human agency shifted over the years as a practitioner? And you've also written about it. And especially since you've mentioned that, with AI, it sort of flattens out the responsibilities of astrological readings, and you've mentioned it also being intuitive. So do you think that also increases the burden of sorts on a person who, like you, if you take it as something to be of a sacred space and a duty?
So as something that is being taken over by AI, honestly, I've never looked at it like that. I think that people who actually do take it for what it is will know that this is something that they're doing for entertainment. So if you're doing that, it's like whatever you do as a source of entertainment, no problem. I think people know better than to take that too seriously, in my sort of opinion. And I don't think that something like intuition can be replicated at any level. And I see, which is also one of the fundamental reasons of astrology becoming what it has become over the years, especially in the last decade. It's like you've completely removed the human out of it. Even in astrologers that are doing it, it's become sort of like this very capitalist space, which it's not really was ever supposed to be. But again, I think with time, what people, there's a great distinction between a lot of people who just want solutions. Very few people want to put in the work. So I have, like, at least in the work that I do, I can't say I work with like 200 people in a month, but I work with people more frequently. So like people who are willing to put in the effort in actually having difficult conversations with their own selves, for example, right? Willing to put in the work on themselves, knowing that astrology is not going to fix their life, the work they're going to have to eventually do on their own. So I see a lot of people also opening up to that space. But again, there's honestly all kinds of people.
You've mentioned your focus and your core focus of work being making people to work on their own inner selves and doing a lot of self-work. Do you think there also is a risk for people often to, I wouldn't say blame is the right word, but to cling on to the fact that karmic patterns, planetary transits can be used as an excuse to avoid taking accountability for their own choices? Like, is that a pattern that you observe?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I see people blaming Mercury retrograde and like Saturn retrograde and like, oh, I'm in the Sarasati, and just not willing to put in the work a lot of the times. A lot of people just say, oh, my time is going to come in 2028, so I'll just work then. But nobody really even understands that even for you to get the reward eventually, I mean, you've got to put in the work today. So it's like, that's where the Vedantic lens comes in, right? Like if you read the Gita, it literally, Krishna says that there is nothing called as no karma. Even not doing karma or not working, even inaction is a form of karma. So you're not escaping it in any way or form. So by just blaming planetary energies and saying, oh, this is not happening, and hence I should now sit at home and do nothing for the next some time. I mean, there's lots of ways of escapism, and this is just one of those. And has it become that? Absolutely. I've noticed, I've seen that and observed that in a whole bunch of people. But again, it's everyone operates from their own kind of space of awareness. And really, I like to focus on people that really are willing, again, to put in the work. If it's just about eventually blaming the planets, then what good can I also do to someone's life? And I've always said this in terms of, responsibility that I feel about working with someone is, I think, like, for me, a lot of this work flows through me versus feeling like I am the one that's deciding, that I am the doer in this entire situation. So my job is to do whatever best I can do, and the rest is really going to be up to the person that I'm working with.
Has that been, is that a hurdle that you face with people who come to you for consults, where accessibility to, like we've spoken about, AI platforms, which do help you understand a few basics about your birth charts, does that seem like a hurdle because you are aware of it, you read up on it? However, there's a break in chain when it comes to for interpretation. So when someone, say, comes to you post having read up their charts or having certain interpretations and biases in mind, how tough of a work does that become for you to not just deal with those biases, but then also to start from scratch and to help, really make them understand and kind of put it all together for them?
See, astrology is not something that you can do half-baked anyway. So I've had a lot of people, okay, not a lot, but I've had a fair few people who at some point thought, okay, that they know a lot. But again, I've been fortunate enough that people have also been very willing to then learn and kind of build on what they already know. And they know how much they're aware of and how much work they need to put in. And I've also then, like, I always say this to people, that, if you are so interested, like, just learn it, study it, understand it, not just from like, oh, you want to become an astrologer. And I have students that have like full-time jobs that have absolutely no intention of ever becoming astrologers, but like study from me like for six months, and from a very, very obviously like a Vedantic space, just to like get to know their life, their own self better, their own life better. So I think I don't deal with as many people who come to me with very rigid opinions on what they feel like, I know this and now you kind of build on it. So, and I always say, like, I think it's much easier that people don't know too much, so that I can just kind of give them a whole, it's easier for me to work with. But if they do come from with a lot of research, then I just kind of have to be like, okay, you leave that aside and then let me tell you what I see. And then if you have any questions, that's the way to address it.
I want to ask you now, like a quick, since we're short on time, we won't be able to get into the depth of it, but a quick map or a reference point for people to start with, how to look past predictive noise and anchor themselves back to the true contemplative essence of Vedantic wisdom. How would you put it for them?
Do we take into consideration astrology or not?
Definitely, we could take astrology into consideration. Okay. So, like a starting point for people, who need to ground themselves. So, how would what is your advice?
From like a pure like self perspective of, even if it was just contemplative and they had no knowledge of astrology, I would say, I think it's about asking yourself, how honest are you with yourself on the daily? And I'm saying, how much are you living from what the society has laid out for you? How much are you doing as per what you've been conditioned to believe? Because all of Vedanta is self-inquiry. And when I say self-inquiry, it means to the degree that like there is nothing called as borrowed wisdom. And when I say borrowed wisdom, it's like, it's not that you don't study and you don't learn. It's like in terms of life conditioning. It's about something as simple as, at this age you have to do this, or at this age you have to be like this, or this is the kind of person that you should be, or this is what success looks like, or this is how much money one should be having, and this is how you should be living your life. I think just basic understanding of actually who are you, because we live in a life that is so actively competitive, which is, you're constantly seeking validation, you're constantly comparing your life. Like, to the degree that I often get asked that if you don't have an external sort of checkpoint to see if you're doing okay, then how do you even know you're doing okay? Because we're now so used to looking at the life around us to be like, oh, are we doing fine? Like, we're at a certain age, have we done what everyone else is doing? We forget that everyone's life is their own unique path. And that is the essence of what the word dharma even really means. And to find your own purpose, because so many people like you're like looking for your purpose, but they're just so afraid of doing anything which is out of the ordinary. Just doing something which is not carved out for you as a path, and this is the safe path. If you're literally going to live your entire life out of safety and being afraid of, if I do this then I don't know how that's going to go, I mean, purpose is like far outreach. So the idea is to start to live with your own self a little bit more honestly, and this comes with every small choice that you're making. You need to ask yourself, is this really me, or is this like something that I was taught to believe or something? Because versions of right and wrong and this is what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing will change if you take a flight and get out of the country and there's a whole other view of what is right and wrong. So one is that, and the other from an astrological perspective is just understanding what dasha you're in and understanding what kind of planetary influence and aspects of your life that are really kind of the focus at that point in time. It really helps put in perspective what you're fighting. I think a lot of the time it's like you're just looking in the wrong direction. So just to get a sense of what you should spend more of your time even contemplating on or working more towards, and understanding your own journey a bit better. Because I think with astrology, what I found is most helpful is, because we are so attached to the identity of our life and everything within our life, we don't really step out and look from get an eagle's view on it. So astrology really helps with just getting that and realizing that, okay, all of this had to kind of get you to where you're at and where you're at in terms of, what's going on in your life, what kind of headspace are you on, in what is important, what is not important, what are the things that you could be doing better. I think from an astrology perspective, that gives a lot of just clarity in where you can be going. But just from a Vedantic perspective, this is what I tell everyone, just observe your mind. Because we're so afraid of, observing our mind, because we're like, no, I don't know what I'm going to get. Like, you're so uncomfortable of just sitting in stillness, even for 20 minutes, that we reach for our phones or we reach for some form of entertainment. So just to begin with that, just to be able to, question, is this me? And to be able to sit with yourself for a bit and just even understand sometimes what you enjoy, and you'll realize, you could have gone years without even realizing what kind of holiday you like, because you've just been on holidays that your family likes or your partner likes or your children like. That if you ask yourself, oh, what do I really like, you won't even have an answer. I've seen that. I've spoken to women who are like, I'm like, what do you even know what food you really like? And she's like, no, but I eat what everyone eats. So that's how much we don't even know ourselves today. And that's a very small example, but that translates into literally everything in our lives. So I think that's that is an exercise, something that I get people to do, is to just start observing their minds, and they get very uncomfortable. So just to even get to understanding, are you living a borrowed life, or are you living the truest version of yourself?
How about the fact that, most of the times, if my understanding is correct, the focus for most people in their charts is on the Lagna chart and the Navamsa chart, right? The focus, and they refuse to look beyond that. You, I'm sure, must have seen hundreds of birth charts. What is it that you feel an area of, the astrological birth details that are often overlooked, but if people paid more attention to that area, it could be much more actionable and could have more change in their life?
I think Dashas, because your birth chart is a snapshot of what your life of literally like the sky that you were born. But if you're not going to understand how that translates into your life today, like I've had people, who've gotten married in certain periods where they met their partners and gotten married in like periods that are heavily influenced by Rahu, and then the people were really unsure about even making that decision and getting into that relationship. But there are astrologers that will just be like, yeah, this is the best period. And I'm like, on what basis? Because you can see that there is no clarity. You can see that this person is not necessarily operating from, seeing the world from rose-colored glasses, doesn't really know what they're getting into. And yet you think that it's the right time. So I think it's just, you look at the Lagna and you say, oh, this person has like a decent chart and gun mil rahe hain, and, seventh house is okay, and this is fine, and shadi kar lo. And this comes with not just with marriages, although I've seen this most, prominently in terms of stuff to do with getting married. But even otherwise, like I think that people end up just looking at Lagna and Navamsha, not understanding how that's translating into one's life at that given point in time, because that is actually how you're experiencing your life, right? It's a very good looking Lagna can also give you a very, very difficult period in life. So it's about, if you're not able to actually understand how that translates into a human's experience, then there's no point.
This is like a quick takeaway. What happens when ancient wisdom collides with artificial intelligence? Your takeaway on that.
So I think there's good and bad to everything, right? I think that artificial intelligence is great as long as it's aiding something, as long as it's used in support. But if you're just going to give like the entire power to AI, it's kind of where it really starts to what's that word that they use, where it just starts talking pretty much. It just give you what you want to hear. There's a lot of bias.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bias. Sorry, what were you saying?
Echo. It's called an echo chamber, an echo room.
Yeah, exactly. It's the echo room. And it's just going to feed you what you want to hear. So I think if like AI is really being used by someone that knows what they're talking about, and they use it to aid, whatever they're trying to put across, no problem. But like if ancient wisdom is just AI, then you can have a very misconstrued, misunderstood, misinterpreted version of it, which is pretty much with AI with anything, right? It's the same thing with ancient wisdom. So I think it's important to be mindful with AI in general. But it can be, I use AI a lot in terms of, I think it's a great tool to help you become more efficient. But at the same time, it's about understanding that, it's kind of here to support you, and not the other way around.